Okay, well, welcome back. I see a few familiar faces. This is not the last session. There's one more. And this is about ad fraud, and there's both risk and opportunity, and maybe even other things that are associated with fraud. And my name is Eric Mott. I'm the founder and CMO of CreatorBase. It's a niche community of creators, ideas, and insights, and we're focused on creating digital and sustainable business value. I'm based here in the Bay Area, and I've got a really great panel here for you in terms of expertise, thought leadership. Before I get into that, I just want to say earlier, I published what I call a create sheet. It's a hashtag create sheet. If you go to creatorbase.com or on Twitter, CreatorBase, you'll see more. But the idea of the create sheet is pretty straightforward. There's a few bullets and links and people and information about what we're going to talk about. That's the starting point. Based on your feedback, based on their discussion, based on tweets we'll be watching, or other activities on other social channels around this topic, we're going to kind of update it over time. And it might be a great resource for you down the road. So take a look at that. What I want to do is quickly just introduce some of the folks and give you a little bit of fun fact, or facts, maybe. They've given me a few. We'll start over with Juliette Riviere. She is it wasn't too bad, actually.
That was perfect.
She's French, by the way. I'm not, but I'm trying. She's the Senior Director of Compliance Programs at Trustworthy Accountability Group, which is also known as TAG. And her Twitter handle is tag_today. And the fun thing about her, I already kind of gave away a little bit, she's French. She spent some time in, I think about 12 years or so, in New York. I think you're still there in New York,
Correct.
but you were born in France.
Paris.
And you're the first person I've heard that actually says you like frog legs.
Love it.
And I'm not saying that's a bad thing, I've just never heard someone say, yeah, I love frog legs. So, okay, next is Christine Allee. She's the Vice President of Sales at Pixalate, and I believe you're out of Los Angeles.
That's correct, Santa Monica.
And I've got a story for her afterward at wine. By the way, wine will be happening later. I hope you're all going to be there. I've got a Roger Federer story for her, but that's a whole different thing. But actually, it's not quite. She apparently has run 38 marathons. Oh, no, it's 8 marathons. 8 marathons. Not bad. Not bad. 8 marathons. Now, were they the large, long marathons, or?
Yeah, there's only one length.
Okay.
6.2 miles.
I don't know these things. But I am a tennis player, and she apparently has some interest around tennis. In fact, she wants to go to all 4 Grand Slams at some point.
True.
So maybe I'll give her a tip there. Okay, and then there's Bjorke. Bjorke, sorry, he's the product manager at Traffic Quality at Google. And I believe you're local. Okay, and he's got a really interesting story, and I can relate to this. He was so excited about joining Google that he showed up a week too early for the interviews. It's an honest mistake. I mean, people have done, I've done that probably, but no, it's all about the testament to Google. It's a great place to work. And then we have John Brown. He's the head of publisher policy communications at Google as well, and he's been in his role, I think about 6 months. Spent 10 years, actually, I'm not quite sure what this means, but selling against Google, so I suppose you had some, we'll get into that a little bit. What I find interesting is he actually knows Sean Parker. And now the question I have is, did you actually go to his wedding?
No, I was invited.
Okay. Well, but I'm sure he tweeted or texted you or something, or G plus or whatever. Okay, but here's the cool thing. He's learned to be a pilot. Now the question for you is, what kind of plane are you training in?
Just Cessna.
Okay. And you'll go to Piper at some point or something like that?
It depends on how much money I want to spend.
Okay. Okay. So what we're going to talk about for the next 40 minutes or so is ad fraud, opportunities, risks, challenges. These are the experts. So take the opportunity to ask questions. We will have an opportunity for you to ask questions. If you have a burning question while we're going through our own, just raise your hand. I've got a mic here. I'm happy to run it. I've been running it all day long. And so with that, I'm going to go ahead and just start with the first question. And it really, it speaks to they're experts in this field. They're doing very cool things. And I just want to know more about why you're doing this and how you're doing it. And we'll start with on the table.
Sure.
How everyone, Juliette Riviere. I started about 10 years ago as an intellectual property lawyer, fighting criminals in the offline space. I was always fascinated by the power of brands and how they influence culture and people. And after this legal career, I became a digital brand strategist, which gave me a good insight into the digital advertising community. About 6 months ago, I joined the Trustworthy Accountability Group, which is a nonprofit business league that represents the industry to fight fraud, malware, piracy, and promote business transparency. So we have a lot of important missions on our plate, and it's a challenge every day to understand different facets of the industries, different challenges, and how we can best address criminality in this space.
Okay, Christine.
Hi, I'm Christine Allee. I'm with Pixalate. We are an advertising technology company, and we're very focused on fighting the ad fraud problem. So I first became aware of ad fraud about 8 years ago. I was working for a publisher, and I just got to see firsthand the challenges that publishers and networks face in finding the right supply partners to work with. And I saw how easy it was for fraud to kind of slip into the supply chain. And I also saw how little transparency there was to advertisers in terms of this process. And so now, 8 years later, ad fraud has really grown into a huge multi-billion-dollar business, unfortunately. It's actually estimated by the ANA to be about $6.3 billion a year wasted on ad fraud on display ads alone. That doesn't even cover, other things. So, this is really frustrating because nobody's really going to jail for this, and the problem really is continuing to grow. So about 3 years ago, an old colleague of mine reached out to me. He happened to be the CEO of Pixalate, and said, hey, let me tell you about what Pixalate's doing to bring transparency into the marketplace and to really solve the ad fraud problem. So I was really excited to join the team, to be part of that effort. And now on a daily basis, I'm working with publishers, I'm working with ad networks, I'm working with brands to really help them fight this ad fraud problem.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Bjorke.
Yeah, so my name is Bjorke. I'm a product manager at Google on the ad traffic quality team. We focus on fighting ad fraud. So I spend a lot of time in my life with big data analytics in the internet space. I spent many years at Yahoo building various types of solutions for advertising and web analytics. And 2 years ago when I joined Google, I found the perfect opportunity to combine my passion for big data and doing something really, really meaningful, which is trying to prevent or protect the online internet space against ad fraud. And it's something daunting. Sometimes daunting, what we're trying to do, the size of the problem we're trying to fix. It's very complex, but it provides everything that a curious mind can ask for. It's extremely challenging problems to solve. It's very complex ecosystem. You have to combine both technology and human resources to solve this. It isn't only a technology, it's not only a people solution. And it has the potential of really having some meaningful impact. So on an everyday basis, I work with our team at Google on identifying and addressing invalid traffic in all types, all shapes, and all forms across all of the Google ad networks. And the adversaries we are working against are often very, very capable people and organizations, and they are a very justified or a non-simple, it's not a simple adversary we're working with and trying to fight. It's an arms race, really. We're trying to stay ahead of them, and they try to beat us. The good thing, of course, is that it provides perfect job security.
Okay, and John.
Yes, John Brownlee. Before Google, I ran ad networks, so I know firsthand how difficult it is to maintain a clean network. And so my strategy was always just to mitigate the amount of work I spent doing this. I would only do direct deals. And so that limited my scale. That was, I couldn't really feel comfortable working with programmatic or with other ad networks, so I do deals directly with folks like Forbes and Business Week and Wall Street Journal, which took quite a bit of salesmanship, so I'm proud of that. But it also made growth really slow. And so that's kind of those early days. I've been 15 years in this industry. Those early days really kind of shaped my career to where it is now, dealing with communicating the things that we're doing around the fraud protections. And so, after the running of the ad networks, I actually was GM of a company called Adometry, and we had 92 different ad network clients. And those clients, through their data, I would see certain things that they were not doing correctly, and it would drive me crazy. And some of it was really simple, not using common sense, and then other things, they were doing everything they could, and they were still victims. And so, fraud is definitely a problem. It's a similar space to what Christine's in, and I'm happy to be at Google, where we have really talented people like Perry here that work on this all the time. So that's my perspective.
And then if we were going to tweak a very simple idea or thought around what this fraud is, it's motivated by money, obviously. There's other motivation in terms of just attacking networks and such, or is it really just more about money? Can you just add a little bit of that, and feel free to
Sure. So you see many types of fraud, but typically they're either motivated by direct money or some type of popularity. You also see fraud in non-advertising space for Facebook likes and Twitter followers and so forth. Someone wants some attention or something out of it. On the ad space, it's typically either by monetary reasons, you want to make money, or you want to sabotage someone else.
Okay. Any other thoughts?
I mean, I think it's all about the money for the most part. The one example I can think of that's not monetary is you do see click fraud happening where competitors will try to click on their competitors' ads and waste their money. So that's more of a revenge strategy. But overwhelmingly, as I said before, it's a $6.3 billion business just in display ads. So it's really the fraudsters wouldn't be doing it if there wasn't so much money in it. I mean, it's the easiest way to make money hacking and have very little chance of going to jail.
I want to build on this, is there's a very low barrier to entry for those criminals. There's very little to lose, which is what we're trying to deter them from and have them understand that they should go to a different industry that's more lucrative. But basically what we're trying to educate the supply chain on the dangers of fraud. Mainly the repercussions are financial, but there's a reputation damage that's overwhelmingly disrupting for brands and advertisers. You don't need to be a marketing genius to understand the reputational issue that fraud causes. But yeah, that's their main goal is to make a buck, and we're here to as a coalition to get great minds around the same table to think about strategically and collectively how we can address this problem.
Okay, so before I move on to kind of those set of questions, we're going to make this interactive. So does anyone else in the audience have a question right now about what we've just talked about? Any questions? Okay, I'll just run the mic over to you.
So a competitor clicking on my ad is really easy for me to understand. What's the typical fraud cycle for the fraudster who's trying to gain monetarily, other than someone clicking on my ad? How does that person gain? How does that work?
Are you asking how do they make money?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So one common way would be to, so they can set up sorry, am I close enough to the mic? They can set up a fake website, basically, and then what they do is they create bots. So is everyone pretty familiar with what a bot is? Yes? Okay. So they gain bots and they flood those websites with bots, and then they register those websites on ad networks. And so advertisers start paying, and they get paid essentially to, they get paid for ads that are never seen by humans, but they're making money the same way legitimate publishers are, except they don't have legitimate site with legitimate content. That's a very common way that it's done.
And the danger of bots is that it's not just installed on your computer, your husband's computer, your friend's computer. It's a whole network. That's why we call them botnet, a network of robots that are crawling the web, that are invading your computer, and that are providing more financial incentive for those criminals to act on a wider scale.
Okay. Any other thoughts? Good. Okay. So, we're starting to get more into kind of the day-to-day kind of tactical issues, if you will. And because you are so immersed in this topic and in your fields, what are some of the kind of key insights that, and I don't mean necessarily the big ideas or the recommendations, but the key insights around the trends that you're seeing and how to deal with some of those issues that we just kind of touched on, and maybe even a few best practices, and we'll just kind of just run it up and down however you feel comfortable.
So I think from a business league perspective, we have two main ideas: is to act strategically and collectively, is to get the experts around the table, advertisers, publishers, ad networks, everybody in between, to find solutions that work for all the good guys to fight against the bad guys. Because as Per pointed out earlier, it's a little bit of an arms race. So it really is about bringing great minds together to lower the barrier to entry for those fraudsters to stop seeping into the platforms, especially in a programmatic world. It's an exceptional challenge, to say the least.
Okay. And just to kind of introduce further, so we hear about this, blacklists. Is that valuable? I mean, tell us more about what the blacklists are and why should we be thinking about it?
Okay, yeah, I'll go first. I think blacklists are extremely valuable. They can be a little bit simplistic. I think a lot of, let's say, marketers might want to just have a domain blacklist and think, okay, as long as I'm only buying on premium domains and I'm not buying these junk domains, I'm going to be okay. But the issue is a little bit more complex than that. You need to actually look at all the different ways that fraud is entering the ecosystem. So it's not just from domains that are in and of themselves bad. Even premium domains are also going to have bots, because that's one of the things that fraudsters do. They want their bots, sophisticated fraudsters want their bots to look as much like humans as possible. So they're going to send them to legitimate domains so that they have a search history that looks like a legitimate human, and people will actually want to serve ads to them. So it's definitely very important to look at it in terms of domains, but also in terms of users. So that's looking at IPs, looking at data center IPs, where a lot of fraud is happening in data centers right now. Looking at user agents that are spoofed, looking at the infrastructure behind where the fraudsters are, where the fraudsters are operating in order to be able to cut it off at the root by, for instance, blocking data center IPs. It's one topic that's pretty hot right now. So it's not just domain blacklist, it's a little more expansive than that.
Juliette, what are your thoughts?
TAG has two anti-fraud initiatives currently. One is the domain fraud threat list, which AOL, Brightroll, Spot Exchange are contributing to, that TAG is going to look at, aggregate, and push to the industry. Another initiative is the data center IP list, which Google was at the initiative of, along with Distillery, MediaMath, Rubicon, TubeMogul, Yahoo, and other players. And that list is also going to be aggregated, reviewed, and by TAG and pushed to the industry. So they're better educated on the different sources of invalid traffic.
So, given that we are one of the ones who have been providing and facilitating and helping kicking off some of these black industry share blacklists, we obviously believe in it. I think it's an important part of the overall defense. Is it a silver bullet? No, but it is an important part of the defense, and we need to raise the bar and make it harder for the people behind the invalid traffic and the fraud to do business. It's going to raise the bar, make it harder, make it more expensive, more difficult for them. And blacklist, again, not silver bullet, but in a very important part.
John?
So we're having running that network and also managing data for over 90 of them. It's kind of a minimum best practice.
right, so we're all pretty familiar with these little pesky things, mobile. I don't know about you, but I use it probably way too much for different things. And of course, the emerging countries, it might be the main device that they use for communication, also for commerce, because either they can't afford desktops or iPads or whatever, but just the way the world is, you know, with mobility. So I kind of want to talk a bit about, and just go up and down, from a mobile fraud perspective, or mobile ad fraud perspective. Some insights, some trends, some just, you know, best practices to consider.
I'll go first. Yeah, so Pixalate is actually seeing a little bit higher trend towards fraud in mobile versus desktop, so it's definitely a problem in mobile. But beyond just the fact that there's a little bit more fraud happening in mobile, it's also trickier to catch and measure. The typical fraud measurement technology that's used in desktop doesn't work in mobile, so it's important if you're trying to detect fraud in the mobile environment that you have the right technology to do that, that is actually designed for mobile, not sort of a desktop hack that you're trying to use in mobile. So it can definitely be very tricky. The data center IP initiative that Juliette was talking about will be especially helpful in catching mobile fraud because 8% of all fraud is happening in data centers, but in mobile it's 20%. So there's a lot of mobile fraud that happens inside data centers. So that's a really important initiative.
And just to add to it, where's the vulnerable area when it comes to mobile? In terms of either technology or human practice or things we do, where's there, kind of the social engineering that might be happening?
So I think it's a little too early to really know how fraud will happen in mobile. It's still fairly early, and most fraudsters are probably still using desktop because it's a much easier environment to start in. But yeah, you do see some pay-to-click views in mobile. Some of you may have seen an infamous picture of a person in somewhere in the world sitting in front of a desk with 100 cell phones, iPhones, mixed type of phones, and they're just sitting there and clicking on ads or whatever they're doing, likes or whatever fraud they're doing. But we certainly see the potential of significant abuse in mobile because it's becoming such a dominant way. But it's still, I think, a little early to know exactly how they're going to utilize that unique environment for doing it. One aspect we do see in mobile is that there is quite a bit of accidental traffic, which is not directly fraud, but still invalid traffic. Because you have fat fingers and sometimes users click on the ads instead of on the content. So that's also an important aspect of the mobile space.
The risk of sounding obvious, mobility is also a challenge that we're trying to wrap our head around. So I'll let you go, but
That's following up on Pierre's point, poor implementation, certainly, especially if you're playing a game or doing something, and then an ad pops up where navigation should be for advancing in whatever you're doing. Something that I've seen.
So you're basically when you're on a small form factor, you're less able to scrutinize. So that actually speaks to a lot of UX design, thinking. And when I was in the earlier session, we were talking about just wearables, and of course that's mobile. And there's so much opportunity to do new things with integrated systems where you're moving around, you're wearing your watch or your iPhone or whatever. But there's such an emphasis on you have to design for that experience and for those different point factors. I'm not talking about responsive necessarily, but you have to be aware of it and you have to design or you're going to be disregarded and potentially creating threats.
Well, an interesting point with that is sometimes it seems like it actually is perhaps designed, like it's designed that way intentionally, and that's where you get into, is it fat finger, is it fraud? It may be fat finger, but sometimes the actual design by the app developer, it's designed that way because they want to get the additional clicks, and it's actually in a spot that would make it easy to fat finger. So that's definitely can also be a form of fraud in that it's designed for that purpose.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
We're building a lot of educational collateral around proper implementation use for ad mob and different things. So.
Okay. Again, I'm going to ask, just because we want to make this interactive, who has a question? Right? I like that.
running on Google AdWords and Google Shopping ads. So for each of my monthly statement, I can see a lot of invalid clicks was deducted from the statement. What is your strategy of to protect us as advertiser to get a clean clicks from your search engine?
So we have, that's part of Google, of course Google search is a big part of our ad system at Google, and big part of our effort is exactly to protect AdWords advertisers on Google search as well as on display. The good part there is that with CPC traffic and you often driving action, you're driving conversions, we have a better ability to protect them and easier than in certain other parts of the ads ecosystem. And so you will see whenever we find invalid traffic, whether it's accidental or fraudulent, we will then credit you as an advertiser, so you will pay for that. And whenever we do not pay a publisher, or in case of searches ourselves mostly, but on the display, if you don't pay the publisher, we will always credit the advertisers for that money, so you don't pay for it. Generally on search, I think you will find a fairly low % of invalid click. What type of levels do you typically see?
I didn't do the calculations, but I think that's a really, really small portion.
Yeah. In general, on search, because we own search, most of search, so we don't try to defraud you. So that's why search is a relatively low rate of invalid traffic, but you will see the credits. So, and the credits may show up a while after, because in some cases we find invalid traffic a while after the fact. We're not able to detect everything in real time. So sometimes you will see it coming later on as a credit.
Any other thoughts? Okay. Actually, we may have touched on this briefly, but tell me what in-app fraud is, and more specifically, what can we do about it?
So if by in-app you mean ads in apps on a mobile device?
Well, generally speaking, I did a little searching around, and it kept coming up, and I just wasn't sure. I'm relatively new to this space, so if you were going to educate me what it is and why I should care.
So in mobile you have 2 and 1 ways to consume content or do stuff. It's either in an app or in a browser, where you can browse any website you want.
Okay.
And in-app is basically typically used to refer to activity ads that are embedded inside applications.
Okay.
And those are often click to download ads where you try to promote other apps to install on your device, but they can also be other types of ads. And you can see fraud there just like you can see in the web, both on mobile and on a desktop. And there was a report recently by Forensic where they estimated the mobile fraud level, and they identified and called out some apps that were doing ad hiding, where they have ad placements but they hide them so the user doesn't see them. I think that's what the essence of what they do. And we at Google, we invest also heavily in identifying apps that are doing ad fraud and then removing them from the Play Store. As well as if you see malicious or bad applications for other reasons, we remove them and we actually try to help users uninstall it from their devices. It's part of the ecosystem.
And apps are similar to mobile web or to the regular web in that the fraud can either be with the app itself, like Per was talking about, or it can be user-based fraud. So it can be a bot that's on the app. So it can be non-human traffic, just like you could get on on the regular web or on mobile web.
Just that we're all, again, the small form factor doesn't allow you to discern so much the threat, and we're all doing more apps. So how do we protect ourselves as consumers? What's kind of the 1 or 2 things that a consumer can look for to see if there's a bad apple in there?
Stay vigilant. It sounds very basic, but it's not just a problem of fat finger, it's a problem of what would you do in your regular everyday life if on the street. Think of that type of behavior. How do you protect yourself from people stealing money in your pocket when you're in a busy subway in Tokyo or in any other mainstream city? It's sort of you have to make it a conscientious effort to look at how you're navigating the web, how you're choosing your apps, and sometimes you won't be able to detect it. So there's no straightforward answer, but I think for all of you guys, it's important to understand in terms of fraud. It could be pixel stuffing. It could be the criminal stacking ads on top of each other. So you think you're just clicking one ad, but yet you're clicking 120 ads. So there are many forms of fraud, and to be vigilant.
Yeah, because my son, he's new on the computer and of course iPad. He's been coming to me like in tears lately, saying, "I'm being attacked, all this adware," and I don't really understand it because I think, well, what can we do? Do we just take it to the store, get a new computer? So I think what is the one resource? Maybe there's a number of resources that the consumer can go to really understand the threats and what you can do as a consumer. Can you recommend any resources?
If it's an app, I would go directly to where you purchase the app, so either the App Store or the Play Store or whatever, and report what activity you're seeing. And then, I know Google spends a lot of time with the Play Store, so I'm sure Apple does as well. So I would start there with apps at least.
Okay.
I would be careful with installing apps that are not from a trusted source. If you install apps that's not from the Play Store or not from the iTunes Store, those will not have been scrutinized. So we scrutinize, we review and test apps extensively, and we have removed a lot of apps from the Google Play Store in order to protect you against unwanted software, whatever it may be that could cause you harm. So be very careful with installing software from other sources.
Okay.
Also, a practical piece of advice, I don't know which school your son attends, but it may be worthwhile to discuss, to bring it up to the principal. I know I was at the IB Paris about a month ago, and they told me that schools are starting to educate the kids very early on about malware in a very simplistic format, because they're young kids and shouldn't be afraid of cyber attacks. But it's a reality in our world, and so I think if they bring it up in casual terms at school, it could also help educate the young minds about the dangers of criminality online.
Okay. So I assume we have we got a question. Let me get you a mic over there.
Does Chrome extensions like the ad blocks help at all?
Help with this solve what?
For like blocking ads or whatnot, or bad.
So ad blockers are not necessarily helping solve, it does not really help solving the ad fraud problem, in my opinion. We have to keep in mind that the internet, a large portion of the free internet is funded by advertising. And ad blockers is basically, if the ad blockers become at scale, they will cause a problem for them. How are these publishers going to be able to fund the work they put into providing the content or the services they provide? From a fraud perspective, if you're thinking of removing the money supply or taking away the ability for fraudsters to commit fraud, ad blockers are not going to help, because there's plenty of other people who don't use ad blockers.
Right.
From say protecting yourself, it may help at the margin of protecting against advertising, but I wouldn't count on that.
Okay.
Okay, so now I'm going to move to more of the audience of maybe what they're thinking about as advertisers. So, what are the 2 or 3 things you recommend that a future advertiser or an advertiser in general should be thinking about when choosing an ad platform or a network and such? What are those things? And you can kind of jump around however you want and build off one another.
Sure. So one problem is lack of transparency in the ecosystem, and another problem is the proliferation of fraud and malware. If you want to show your advertisers have a huge responsibility in this fight against fraud, because they're the ones who have the budget and they're the one who can actively do something about it. You can join our certification program, the Business Transparency Guidelines, which IQG is about the quality of your inventory, disclosing the quality of your creatives to the other side publishers and platforms in between. And as far as anti-fraud efforts, you may have your own solutions. They may or may not be as elevated as you would like them to, but think about it not in silo, not in your own business approach, but rather as part of the digital advertising ecosystem, what can you do to collectively, along with other brands, without compromising your budget, without compromising your ideas, how can you solve this problem at a master scale, at a macro level? So I think it's important not to just think about your day-to-day activity if you do want to fight fraud, but rather elevate it to another level and join certification programs to show all your partners you care about it. That would be a great PR tool for all of you. And join our working group. We have an anti-fraud working group that meets every other week. We also have a business transparency working group that you're welcome to join. So by all means, be proactive about this issue because it will not get solved by itself.
I think that the temptation sometimes for advertisers is to put this off on the supply side and to say, you know, my supply partners are responsible for the quality of traffic that I'm buying, and if I, pick good supply partners, everything should be good. And definitely the first step as an advertiser is picking good supply partners, but also you can't then just bury your head in the sand and say, okay, well, the supply side has to take care of this problem. Really, no one has as much to lose as advertisers because it's your money that's really being wasted. You're really the only one that is losing money, is spending your own money on that. So I would say, you should be measuring, your ad buys and measuring them for fraud and understanding where your low quality traffic is coming from so that you can, proactively block it so that you can optimize away from it. So it's just really important for advertisers to not leave that ball in the supply side court.
Yeah, I want to second Juliette's suggestion about getting involved. I don't know, how many of you guys are on the advertising side versus on the publishing side? Advertisers, raise your hand. Okay. Publishing side? Okay. So everyone has a responsibility. We need to fix this as an industry collectively. This is not something any one of us can fix. For example, if we find some bad inventory in a Google network and we remove it from our network, if it shows up next day on another network, we haven't really gained that much from an advertising perspective. And advertisers need to start really asking questions, pay attention, and demand transparency. And whenever these industry initiatives come up, if you support it, that will put the incentive for the publishing side, sell side, to actually provide this and everyone in between. If you guys don't ask for it as advertisers, it's probably not going to happen. The other thing I want to suggest more concretely is that if you run, for example, search campaigns, conversion data is probably very important for you if you do direct response. There will always be some invalid traffic. We're never going to be able to be 100% successful at getting rid of it. That invalid traffic will impact your metrics to some degree, and whether it's a little bit or a little bit more. And one thing that bots will not do is purchase. If you do conversion tracking, try to get your conversion tracking as far into the funnel and as close to the monetary event as you can. That's the hard thing to spoof for a fraudster. The further into the funnel you can get your conversion tracking, the better.
Yeah, I agree. I used to call that hard conversion. So they're the ones that you can just, say contact us, that sort of thing. It's on top of everything else, I would say to interview the publishers you work with and try to get to know what methods they deploy to protect your ads from invalid activity, and see what sort of organizations they belong to, like Traffic of Good Intent or some other IAB group or what have you. Really understand what sort of methods they employ to protect against bad activity. I would say that would be, at a bare minimum, something I would do.
Okay, just a real quick time check. So we're about 5 minutes out, and Jules agrees with me. And I know she would, because I'm watching the clock. But so we've got really 2 more questions, and try to be brief on this next one. And maybe just one response for each organization. So what are you guys doing, or what are you folks doing to really kind of deal with those bad apples out there and the opportunistic entities, people, whatever, that are hurting consumers and advertisers and publishers in general?
So I think I touched upon it earlier, but we're doing, on the anti-fraud level at TAG, we have 3 initiatives that are ongoing. One is the domain threat list, where we're sharing a list of fraudulent domains. One is the data center IP list, where we're sharing data center IP information. And the third one is we're working on creating best practices for publishers, advertisers, and players in the ecosystem to have a common ground, have a common set of rules, because really the problem is there's so many interpretations of what fraud means and so many different ways of looking at the problem. One way we think we can bring value to the ecosystem is standardize and give you a set of best practices. So we have a website, tagtoday.net, which you're welcome to engage with blog posts and all sorts of other touch points that you're welcome to get engaged and tell us what you think.
Thank you.
So Pixalate is a vendor in this space, so we are actually working with people in all areas of the online ecosystem. We work with publishers to help them make sure they're not serving ads to bots and other invalid traffic. We work with the ad networks, the exchanges, the SSPs, and we're also working with brands and advertisers. So we have a number of solutions that allow them to block bad domains, block bad users, really get into data center IPs, bad user agents, proxy IPs, all of that. But we also provide some free resources, and one of the ones that's been most popular in the industry is that we publish every month a global seller trust index. So for any of you guys that are doing display advertising, it tells you who are the good networks. So whether you're actually a buyer or whether you're a publisher, who are the good ad networks to work with in the programmatic space. And we publish this every month for free. It's on our website. You can even get breakdowns of the best networks for different industry categories like entertainment or business or food. So definitely encourage you guys to take advantage of that. And we also regularly blog on this topic. So you can go to blog.pixalate.com to get more insights from us on what we're seeing and thinking about fraud in the ad space.
So we, of course, work very hard to keep our own network clean. Just as an example, in 2014, I think we disapproved over 1 million applications for joining our network. We also work active, and we don't do everything we can not to buy on our real-time bidding platforms from any valid inventory. We also work actively in the industry, like we're supporting the tag initiatives with the IP Center Blacklist and other efforts, because we know to be successful we need to up-level the whole industry. It's not something only one player can solve. In addition to that, we also work across the ecosystem, for example, with the safe browsing and our unwanted software practices. We don't allow anyone to run advertising campaigns for unwanted software, including ad injectors and malware and stuff like that. Safe browsing, which is available through your Google search or through the Google Chrome browser, will protect you against unwanted software. So we try to remove and clean up the whole ecosystem. If we can make it harder to distribute the malware and the botnets, then that will help to reduce the level of fraud in that direction too. So we try to look at this and address this holistically.
And for my role, it's to simply articulate the great work that Pear's team is doing to the ecosystem, because that's what we are really concerned about, is making sure we have a healthy overall ecosystem, users, publishers, and advertisers. So I'll also plug our blog. So it's Inside AdWords and Inside AdSense, providing a lot of transparency on the things that we're doing to protect advertisers and as value add to publishers, so that all of us have a place to grow businesses for years to come.
We have 1 minute left, so I have just a really simple question for you. One recommendation, 15 seconds for each of you.
3 seconds.
15 seconds.
15 seconds.
One recommendation.
Be engaged, and this is a difficult issue, but it doesn't need to be overwhelming for you as professionals. Don't be afraid to ask questions. We were all there throughout our careers or throughout our journeys as human beings to see this as a very complex problem, and it is, but raise questions and don't be afraid of getting involved.
Whether you're an advertiser or a publisher, you should be measuring your traffic and knowing when you're buying fraud or when you're selling fraud. Don't leave it to someone else, and don't assume that things are clean. Always check and measure.
I would say be aware, pay attention, ask questions, and get involved.
If it seems too good to be true, then it definitely is. So pay attention to everything that they said, because it's true.
And with that, I want to thank you, and also if we could just give a round of applause for the panelists.